Hey, Gustus.
Hi. Hello. Hi, Sarbini. Hi.
How are you?
Great. Yeah, it's great to see you here. Thank
Great
you.
to see you too.
Yeah. Yeah, so actually even the yesterday session seemed to be very popular among the students. So yeah.
What was the session yesterday?
It was about PhD, how to why to pursue PhD, how to apply, and how is PhD life like. Yeah.
Was that like a panel or was it like a...
Yeah, it was
Oh, nice.
again like a panel.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, we organized many of the plenary sessions based on things done by learning theory allies. So yeah.
Awesome. It's glad to hear that it's being
Yeah.
used.
Let's see. I only hope that people will show up because this is the last day.
It's the last session, not the last day.
Yeah, it's the last session of the last day. So
yeah. So of all the participants, do you think that most of them want to do a PhD, or there are a bunch that probably are like still deciding?
I don't have any confidence statistics on that, but I mean the school is for research, right? So I guess many people would be interested. I don't know, but yeah, some students are like in the second year, so they don't really know yet, I guess. But it's very useful to have that perspective, right?
Gustus, did you just see the email from Kunal?
Yes, I'm responding. Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, everybody.
Hi. Hi everyone. I think maybe we're in a stable situation now, although we don't have too many participants. This is the last session of the last day of the summer school, so maybe that's one reason. But also, if this is okay with all the panelists, this session will be recorded so that maybe others will have the chance to access that later. That's okay. Great. So yeah, I'm very excited that we have our great panelists, and so this session will be about job prospects after PhD. So in previous sessions, yesterday we discussed about what a PhD is and how to pursue a PhD and how to apply for a PhD. And now we will take one step further and say what is the job market like in theoretical computer science. So this will not only be interesting to the participants, but also to the TAs, to be honest. At least for me, it will be very interesting. So yeah, I'm excited to introduce our panel. So we have Gagan Agarwal. So by the way, I'm just introducing them in alphabetical order. So we have Gagan Agarwal, who's a research scientist at Google, where she co-leads the market algorithms research team, and her interests are in algorithmic learning theory and approximation algorithms, as well as their application to online marketplaces. And prior to that, she received her PhD in computer science in 2005 from Stanford University. So hi, Kagan. We can't hear you, but
hi everybody.
Hi. We have also Surbi Goel, who is a postdoc researcher at Microsoft Research New York City in the machine learning group. And prior to that, she completed her PhD at the University of Texas at Austin, receiving the Bert K. Dissertation Award. And she will soon join the University of Pennsylvania as an assistant professor. And her research lies in the intersection of DCS and machine learning. And what's interesting, perhaps, to the students is that she's also a member of the organizing committee of the Learning Theory Alliance, whose mission is to develop a strong, supportive, and healthy learning theory community. And if you want to learn more about that, I will post, in fact, let me post the link right now. And also, I will try to post it in the Slack here. So hi, Surbi. We also should have we have Surya Gunasakar, who's a senior researcher at the Machine Learning and Optimization Group of Microsoft Research at Redmond. And prior to joining MSR, she was a research assistant professor at TTIC, and she received her PhD in ECE from UT Austin. Hi, Surya. We have also Kunal Talwar, who is a research scientist at Apple, and got his PhD from UC Berkeley in 2004, and also has experience in other places like Microsoft Research and Google Brain. And his research interests lie in differential privacy, machine learning, algorithms, and data structures. We have Madhur Tulsiani, who is an associate professor at TTIC and also a co-organizer of this summer school. And also he's an associate professor at the CS department of the University of Chicago. And he did his PhD at UC Berkeley, advised by Luca Trevisan, and he also spent 2 years as a postdoc at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton University. He's particularly interested in complexity theory, and he also serves in TTIC as the director of graduate studies. And last but not least, we have Sergey Yekanin, who is the manager of the algorithms group at Microsoft Research Redmond Lab. And his current research interests lie in difference of privacy, coding for distributed storage, and coding for DNA storage. And I know it took too much time because we have a great committee, and I had to introduce its members. Yeah, so hi everyone. And without further ado, so let's begin with the first question. So the first question that one might ask naturally after previous session is, what are the main possibilities after completing a PhD? So what are the career options for a theoretical computer scientist? And maybe I don't know, somebody would like begin. We have some.
I mean, if nobody volunteers, I can go.
Great.
So, I mean, from my experience, I mean, it's so some people go onto faculty, like faculty job market, and become faculty, and this is pretty common. And before that, again, in theoretical computer science, postdocs are relatively kind of common. So, like, often people would graduate, would do, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4 years of postdoc, and then become faculty. Some people kind of skip the postdoc stage, but I think in the last years this has been getting less common. So, like, postdocs in TCS are a rather common thing. And then, but then I don't know, maybe it's 1/3, like even at top schools who become faculty. The rest go into industries, into different kind of industries. So some people really have the PhD and then do complete shifts. Some people end up in finance or hedge funds and so on. So some people end up as software developers, but also there are industry research labs, and they are kind of well represented in this forum. So this is the place which is somewhere in between kind of hardcore industry and academia, and it's also a great career option. So and some people spend some time there and then move on to something more practical again, become managers on product teams. Some people stay in research labs for the whole career. I think this is more or less the whole spectrum.
I guess
Great.
Some people also go back from industrial research labs back to academia, and vice versa. I guess there are people who spend some time in academia and then move to research labs. So,
right. So yeah. So you mentioned the postdoc. So what is a postdoc? Because we only yesterday learned what a PhD is. So what is a postdoc?
It's a good, question. I think it. So, postdoc in some sense is a time where kind of people maybe work more independently than they might have done in a PhD, or develop or solidify their research agenda. It's kind of a time to maybe mature some of the ideas that people might have developed in their PhD. And it's what took me a while to explain to my parents in India. It's not a degree, so it's not something where you get an additional degree like a PhD. It's but yeah, it's kind of also not a job, because well, it's not a full-time position. It's something which is supposed to be for a limited time, but I think it's maybe best defined as a period to kind of gain some more experience, solidify your research agenda, mature some ideas after a PhD before you take on faculty or an industry position where you might have a more of a leading role, pursue that agenda that you developed. This is my take on it, but please.
Yeah, I think to add to that, some people also do a postdoc to get like a very different experience in industry. Like they might already have a faculty position and they might do a postdoc to work with a different set of people, to work on a different set of problems before they move on to the next job.
Right.
Yes, I can add from my experience as a
Yeah.
current postdoc. Yeah, so I guess for me, it was the reason I did a postdoc was I wanted to get more breadth and get some experience in an industry lab. So those were the two reasons I chose to do that. And also it gave me time to figure out what I wanted to do next and further motivate me to choose which path I wanted to take. So that was useful. And it is just definitely the best time that you don't have any responsibilities and you can do any kind of research that you want to do. So I've definitely really enjoyed this.
Great. Yeah. So okay. And how is the process of applying for a postdoc like? Is it similar to a PhD application, or it is different, and in what ways? So.
I can take this one, and
Yeah.
I would say it is a little bit less structured. In most cases, although things are changing every time, so things, whatever I say might not be relevant. There are some positions which are very well advertised, like the postdocs repeated when New York labs or any industry lab for that matter. And like this program in TTIC, there are specific programs in, say, I know few others from San Diego, IT. There are a few very well-known postdoctoral programs, but vast majority of the postdocs are a bit unstructured. So usually you reach out to like other researchers who are not your advisors, but are related to the research we are currently doing or research you want to do, and try to either meet up with them over a call or like in person and try to see if that is a good match. And they have a good project to work with and so on. Because in some sense, the postdoc position is also like, it's sometimes tied to a specific project, but it's most often tied to a specific advisor. So you want to think of advisor as a second, I mean, where the gap is closing even more than it did, much more than it did during the course of the PhD. But most majority of the postdocs currently are unstructured. So you have to be proactive in reaching out to faculty, who's the relevant faculties, like maybe start thinking about this a little bit in advance while you graduate, while you're thinking of graduating and so on.
Great. Yeah, does anybody want to add something?
Yeah, if I could add a little bit here. So I think like the big difference with any kind of job that you do after, most jobs you do after PhD, with postdocs, with faculty, with research labs, I mean, compared to the jobs that you will get out of, like when you just graduate out of college, is that basically you are hired based on your scientific reputation. So that's what's something that you should be building up while you are in PhD. And then for any of these jobs, it's your reputation that gets you this job. And so it's not like exams that you need to take. It's not like how you perform on the interviews. Even to get to the interview stage, like there has to be reputation. People have to know your paper basically you published, and that's how you get this.
Right. Yeah, great. Right. So yeah, with that in mind, so we said that there are options like academia or industry, and maybe now we would change and just let us all know, each one of the panelists let us know their perspective on the pros and cons in working in academia or industry. So yeah, we can start perhaps on an alphabetical order. So Gagan, please.
So I guess I can give my perspective of working in a research lab. So maybe not so much about academia, but about the research lab. So I guess so I think all of these options, first of all, I think are great. Like, you really have to do what, I think the most important thing is doing what you want to do. Like it should match what you want to do, right? So like in academia, there is, so the research part will be common across academia and research labs. But in academia in particular, you'll also have a closer relationship with students, teaching, and I guess, and every place I guess has its own administrivia. So like so universities have their own administrivia, research labs have their own administrivia. In a research lab, it's I guess so the research is more focused on getting impact. So it's more motivated from real world problems typically, and closer to the ground in some sense. So I think it's really about what like your passion is, in terms of choosing what you would like to do.
Thank you. Yeah. So Survi, could you give us your perspective?
Yeah, I can add a little bit to that. So I don't have experience with academia yet. I'm going to start. But with industry labs, I think it varies across different industry labs. Like they can be very different flavor. So I have experience with Google and Microsoft. And I think both research labs have a strong component of research. And as Gagan said, that there's a connection to, what products they are doing, as well as, access to product teams that you can talk about regarding getting new research ideas and research problems, which are more motivated by practice. Which I think, at least at Microsoft Research, I feel it's not that far from academia, that it's pretty similar as to the day-to-day job that I do. There is definitely the difference of having students, which is in industry labs, it's like the summer interns are the most time that you actually interact with students. That's the experience I got as a postdoc there. And the rest of the year is mostly working with your peers. So the work style is slightly different than it is in academia. Both have their pros and cons. And I think it just finally boils down to what you enjoy more. And I think as people move around too as well, depending on how their interests change over time.
Great. Yeah. So maybe you could tell us about your way of thinking, making your decisions, right? So yeah.
Yeah, so I enjoyed my experience at the industry lab quite a bit, actually. I got to work with a lot of very interesting people and got to work on different projects across different areas. My motivation to go to academia was that I really enjoy mentoring students, and that's something I felt like I wanted to pursue strongly, and that's basically my motivation to choose in academia over industry.
Great. Yeah. So Surya, could you give us your perspective?
Yeah, sorry, it's going to sound a little bit repetitive because a lot of things are very common. I think so one thing I would like to add is, like, whether academia or industry, there is really a high variance across which specific place you are going to. There are, of course, like the variance is not as high as between academia and industry. For example, like I was in TTIC before, which is very different from any other department I have known or interacted with. Like, not that I've been in UT Austin and I've seen some workings in some other academic departments, and TTIC is very different from other academic institutions. So and I can see that there is a huge variance in terms of how different departments, how different schools function, how different departments within the same schools function, and so on. Even within the same school, there can be quite a bit of variance. And the same thing is also true in industry. Like there are different types of bureaucracies in different industry labs. I have only experience with Microsoft, but from talking to collaborators and colleagues, we can see that there is different levels of bureaucracy in different industry labs. I think most of the other differences people have covered. So for me, like the choices for me were dictated by a lot of reasons, including like places I wanted to stay in and a preference for places I want to stay in, and so on. And one thing I do miss is, like, I like teaching a lot, and in industry you don't get much of an opportunity to teach. I do think like the opportunities for mentoring, it's more sporadic in industry. You don't get to work with the same student for 5 years in a very committed way. Although you can make it work. I've seen some faculty, some industry people pull it out, but it requires an additional level of. In a university, it happens much more organically. When you're in an industry, you need to put in proactive effort into it. And but like I feel like in industry, there's also like a lot of opportunities to mentor. You get students during summer, but there's also an opportunity to continue mentoring them beyond that. But the thing I do miss is like actually teaching some interesting classes from which you learn a lot, which even though teaching is often considered a chore, many times after the first time you make the syllabus, it becomes a bit more natural, and you end up learning a bit every time you teach something. So I do miss that aspect of it in industry.
Great. Yeah. Also, one relevant question is how is a typical day in working in industry or academia? So how much of the time is spent on coding, research, and administrative stuff? And
so I think for me, like it again like varies over time. It's a function of time and your seniority level, both in academia and in industry. I think that's not a different thing. As junior faculty, you do junior faculty as well as a junior engineer. You do sorry, not engineer, researcher in industry. You do spend quite a bit of time in research, whether it's research related to your theoretical work or applied research, in which case the coding takes up much of your time. You do spend, at least the modern industry research labs are more academic in style, so you spend most of your time on research, and there are just different types of overhead. So if my typical day then in summer would be very different. If it's not a summer, I'll have like a few meetings which are group meeting style things, and then I'll have some time to work on my own thing, and there are probably like once or twice a week there will be some administrative or service meeting I would be involved in, and that again the frequency changes over the year. During summer there are a lot more research meetings and so on, because we work with a lot of collaborators. But, yeah.
Great, thank you. Yeah. So maybe if you have, maybe if it is too repetitive, we could go on with something else, unless somebody wants to add something.
If I could add, so just humor, just kind of comments on this industry versus academia that have not been touched. So one thing is compensation. So in industry, it is generally higher, and again, like kind of the factors depend, but it is higher and quite a bit. Another thing is job safety. So in academia, there is a concept of tenure. Like you go to academia, you are assistant professor, associate professor, full professor. So past associate professor, usually people have tenure. So, and that means that it's very, very hard to fire them. Like the department has to be restructured or something. So job safety is very important, especially as you get older. Like by the age, I don't know, you are 50. If you lose a job in industry, it's pretty tough to find one. Again, not impossible, but tough. And in academia, like long before that, you have tenure, so you don't have to worry about these things. And the last thing is freedom. So in academia, people in general are significantly more free to choose things to work on. Like they can really kind of change their area easily. They can, especially past tenure. In industry, you have a manager. So and it varies like across companies, across groups, like how heavy-handed that manager is. But you have to listen to what your manager says. And and managers kind of in research, they understand. Like I mean, they treat researchers as researchers, not as engineers. So like researchers do have freedom, but it is less freedom than in academia.
I guess maybe I'll also add a little bit more. So I guess, as has been said, I think in academia, there's large variance across space, but not that much across time. And in industry, there's large variance in how your experience is across space in terms of which lab you are at, and across time. I guess things are just much more dynamic. That's just the nature of industry. I guess maybe couple of other differences. Like I think if you're going to become a faculty, like you pretty much have to become a manager immediately. Like as soon as you get on the job, you will be hiring students. You are basically responsible for them, or one would hope you feel responsible for them. So I guess there's that kind of responsibility that comes immediately. Whereas in industry, I guess you would start as an individual contributor, and you can be a researcher. That's kind of, you can do your own thing for a long time, and you don't necessarily have that much responsibility immediately, at least. And you can become a manager when you kind of potentially when you want to. And I guess the other difference I feel like is that academia is kind of structured so that you're expected to become the world expert at one small narrow thing. It's like, to get tenure, someone has to be able to say that this person is the leading expert in the world on some small subtopic. So I guess at least for pre-tenure, you're strongly incentivized to sort of work very deeply on one subject and not worry too much about what's around it, where does it fit, and so on. Right? In industry, I guess there's not that pressure, and also you end up working a lot with your colleagues. So at least I've found that it's much easier to be broader in terms of what kind of things you think about, what kind of problems you think about. And also it's a kind of forces, or I guess you have more opportunity to think about, is this the right question to ask? Or where does, if I answer this question, where will that fit in the broader scheme of things?
I see.
I also wanted to add one more thing came to my mind when Kunal was talking, is that in terms of so in industry, right? So you're working closely with product groups, so it requires like a different mindset of trying to understand what their needs are and trying to communicate with them in a way that each side can understand the other. So you are trying to explain your ideas in a way that they can appreciate and trying to understand what their real problem is and so on, which I guess it's different from teaching, but it's kind of related. Like, yeah, just wanted to. So that's also like, it's kind of part of your decision process, as in, what do I enjoy more? Like, is that something you'd enjoy?
Great. Yeah, perhaps Madhur has some things to add as being in academia, right?
I mean, not much
Not much.
to add in terms of what has been said already, but I'd say, I guess, I mean, again, a point which has been made in some form, but this sort of academia versus industry is some form of a divide, but it's not quite a classification. In some sense, I think a lot of people in industry are doing work which is just very similar to what they would have done at any academic department. And a lot of people in academia also collaborate a lot with industry, mentor interns, and possibly also have impact on product. So it's not, there is some sort of fluidity between the two, and it's yeah, it's not necessarily a hard choice that one is kind of either in this line and does academic work, or is in the other line and does work which is more relevant to industry.
So yeah, so related to that, so it is like it is, how easy or advisable is it to switch between academia and industry, and which way is the easiest one? Perhaps.
I mean, okay, again, people probably who have done this switch can speak better to it, but I'll just say my impression as someone who has not actually switched at all. But I think I'll probably echo some of what Sergey was saying earlier, that it's maybe a bit more about kind of your academic reputation, but also partly to do with maybe the kind of work one is doing. And I think in general, someone sort of who's doing good, impactful, visible work probably will find it kind of relatively easy to do switch in either direction. Of course, there are fluctuations, different years, the job market looks different, etc. One significant sort of point in terms of switching to academia is tenure. So a lot of the time, kind of, it's much easier for academic departments to make a pre-tenure offer to someone, means that they're hired as an assistant professor, and then after a while, the department decides whether or not to give them tenure. Department, the university, whatever body we're talking about. Whereas if someone kind of tries to sort of switch to academia as a more senior person, they would typically be hired with tenure. And that's a bigger decision, usually involving various deans, etc. at a university. And then that, again, a person who's a strong researcher, most universities would be eager to hire. But then I think just because there are more kind of interacting pieces, it just becomes a slightly more involved decision, and then it's a slightly different one in nature. But maybe others can add more.
Great. Yeah. So just from a statistical perspective, what would be an estimate for the people that work in academia and for the people that with PhD, I mean, that work in industry? So what's the probability of a given PhD graduate to work in either environments?
Yeah, I think it. So I think like looking at all PhDs, it may give a picture which is a little bit misleading. So because the picture for the top schools, like top, I don't know, 20 schools in the US would be pretty different from the picture for the for across all PhDs. So, and faculty in the top 20 schools, which are the schools where the most of high profile research is done. So this faculty, they tend to come from top 5 schools, I would say. So it's really people from the very top schools that occupy the faculty positions in really it's like top 5 schools that produce faculty for the top 20 to 30 schools in the US. So but even in top schools, so I guess faculty mostly come from this kind of very elite schools, but not necessarily, of course, there are exceptions. So and the lower profile the school is, the less people from there would end up being faculty. So mostly people would end up in industry, and mostly not even in research labs, but in just regular industry jobs. Or in startups again, and so that's my feeling.
Thank you. Yeah, so maybe we could talk a bit more about the job market and how hard it is to apply. I don't know, maybe more details about it. So yeah. Is it necessary for somebody to have a PhD degree in order to apply in industry and academia? And
I think in academia, it's almost always a requirement. Industry, it depends again on the type of research. The core kind of research industry labs, it is nearly a requirement, but there are exceptions. But as far as I know, there are no exceptions in academia. Maybe if someone else knows, they can correct it. Also, the industry is a very broad term, right? So in some sense, there are places which definitely you don't need, you can do research work which doesn't require a PhD degree. You can do applied research work with a master's degree in some of the labs, but then you will also be doing a lot more engineering work, and it won't be a pure research position. But usually to get a purely research position and to be evaluated purely on research, my understanding is that you still require a PhD. I might be wrong.
okay.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well. Most research, the research positions at the industry labs would require a PhD. Obviously, I think faculty requires a PhD. But research is run very broadly across, in some companies like Google for sure, research is done quite broadly across the company, and not all of those positions would require a PhD.
Another thing that I think has not been brought up that I'd like to mention are that there are other non-tenure track academic positions also that people consider, teaching assistant position, for example, that people who are interested in teaching, for example, if that is something they primarily want to do, that's another opportunity for those interested. And there are research assistant professor positions too, though those are usually short-term, but those are also other kind of positions that people consider in academia. And their requirements, I'm not sure what the requirements are for PhD for teaching track, but I would assume you would require a PhD even for those.
There's also like another thing where you can get tenure, but in a teaching line, there are some schools which primarily focus on undergrad teaching. These are like not research in the universities, but you still try to be on top of research, and like the famous ones I know are like the Harvey Med and Olin College in Boston. Like those are the ones I know of, where the teaching faculty is really competitive and they are on top of research. And and it's tenure track positions, so you can get tenure, but your day-to-day life is very different. You will primarily be teaching with just being on top of research and may not be doing active research yourself, or you will have to do it on top of your teaching duties.
I guess on the flip side, there are also academic positions which are non-teaching research positions, where I guess essentially you're in a university, but you basically write grants and get a salary.
That's also the style in some national labs. I guess like we don't have representation from those places, so we don't know really what is the current state of the art in this.
Great. Yeah. So one another thing that one PhD student can do is get involved into internships, right? And so what are what is the situation in applying for an internship, and does it help later in the later career path that they might choose?
I would say yes. I think it's a great idea to do an internship. I guess it gives you gives you an opportunity to work with a different set of people. I think that's always good. You kind of expand your horizons, but you also get to see, I guess, when you're doing a PhD, the only kind of job you have seen done is in the academic faculty positions. In some sense, that's sort of all you know. By doing an internship, you get to see how researchers in a research lab, that's where you're doing your internship, how their day-to-day life is. And I guess you can kind of see firsthand how that's similar and how that's different, which at least when I was applying, I think was really, really useful to have done an internship in an industrial, I guess MSR in this case, to, I guess, get some idea of what it's going to be like. And
yeah, great. If nobody wants to add something.
Yeah, +1 to actually everything that Kunal said. And I think it's really, I would highly encourage people to do internships. It's really helpful in getting to work on new areas, like slightly different areas from what you've been working on, being exposed to new problems, new people, and new settings, right, of work. And you also asked the question of whether it is helpful. And I think it is so helpful in the sense of adding to your profile, right? It is definitely helpful in terms of learning. I think it also helps in terms of profile, both for the place where you went, right? They get to work with you firsthand, but also for other places, because you get one more place that you have worked with, and you can like talk about that, one more experience that you can talk about.
If I can, and so I think you also were asking about kind of the application process. So the application process, it's again, like it is also based on reputation, basically. Like, I mean, the expectations are of course lower than say for postdoc position or faculty positions for permanent researcher, but you need to be seen, like, I mean, you need to be seen as an expert in something, like as a young expert. You need to have like a strong publication in this area, or like otherwise, I mean, there are still exceptions, of course, but like otherwise, how do you convince kind of that that you are the right person to be hired? And another thing, sorry for kind of getting back to money again. So like it also makes sense, like at least for me as a like when I was a graduate student, the fact that you earn a fair bit more as an intern during the summer compared to what you would get like if you stay at school also was a consideration.
Great. Yeah. So what you're saying applies for mostly for research internships, right? Because there are also, yeah, there are other types of internships, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was about internship in research labs, like where you would work with researchers. If you do engineering internships there, of course, like you don't need to have publications. I mean, just need to show kind of that you can, I don't code well and kind of have appropriate background.
Great.
And I guess there's also some notion of like academic internships. I guess there's some people who go spend time over the summer working with a faculty in some other university, and I think that's also has, I guess, all of the things we said about industrial research internships kind of, maybe not all, but most of them hold for that version as well.
Great. Yeah. So if somebody wants to add something, otherwise,
yeah, I did want to,
yeah, great.
I want to add something that like we didn't talk. You're right that you only briefly mentioned engineering internships, and sometimes usually engineering internships are not considered as prestigious as research internships. But I think like I mean, personally feel like it is also not a bad option to try. I don't think it's undervalued much more than it is, because it gives you a perspective on like what engineering side of things does. It may not give you another paper to write, but it can give you a perspective of an engineering side of things. And especially if you do it early enough, or even like midway through your PhD, it also gives you a sense of what happens if you, let's say, you don't want to be in a research area, and it gives you a visibility into the engineering. I mean, because going into engineering after PhD is still a very valid approach, and this would give you a boost in that direction. That if you have implemented some solid system as an engineering intern, that would significantly help the prospects. So I do think it's undervalued more than it deserves. So.
I don't know if you discussed this in your last panel, but there are also in between undergrad and grad school, there are residency programs and other longer term internships that you could do, which are a year or so long across different labs, research oriented. Some are also not non-research oriented, but those are also great options if you want to explore, get a taste of what research feels like before deciding on a PhD program.
Great. Yeah, I think we mentioned that briefly in the previous session. Yeah. Great. So that's all for my questions. I leave it now to the participants, although we don't have too many participants. But if anybody has a question, please. It is the time to ask it.
Again, it might be good to shut off recordings at this time in case anyone's shy about that, but